Welcome to the SATLUJ News Hour. This is Ginger Jeffries coming to you from the Phoenix desk, bringing you the top stories from across the globe. Here are today's headlines. 2 Americans dead, 2 found alive in Mexico kidnapping, and now 1 suspect is in custody. Ukrainian government denies involvement in Nord Stream pipeline sabotage. U.S. Pentagon chief takes a surprise trip to Iraq. Topping the news today, officials in Mexico have arrested a suspect in connection with the kidnapping of 4 U.S. citizens, 2 of which were killed.
Que la mañana de este martes fueron localizados los 4 ciudadanos estadounidenses privados de la libertad el pasado viernes en la zona centro de Matamoros, Tamaulipas. De ellos, 2 se encontraron sin vida.
24-year-old Jose Guadalupe was guarding the house where cartel members held captive and tortured the 4 Americans. The 2 surviving victims, a man and a woman, are now in a hospital in Texas. One has signs of extreme torture, including being shot several times in the legs. A Mexican woman was also killed during the kidnapping by a stray bullet.
Autoridades mexicanas entregaron a autoridades estadounidenses la mujer que resultó ilesa y el hombre que se encuentra herido en el puente internacional de Bronzeville y Matamoros.
The Americans crossed the border near Matamoros last Friday, heading to Mexico for a medical treatment. Authorities believe the cartel mistook them for Haitian drug smugglers. The bodies of the 2 killed are being examined for evidence. President of Mexico, Manuel López Obrador, says there Ukraine denies any involvement in the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines. The case follows a media report citing new intelligence that a pro-Ukrainian group may have been behind last year's attack targeting Russia's gas deliveries to Europe.
Without a doubt, Ukraine is absolutely not involved in the excesses on the pipelines. It doesn't make the slightest bit of sense.
The dismissal by a senior Ukrainian official came in response to a report by the New York Times. According to the report, new intelligence reviewed by U.S. officials suggested a local group loyal to Ukraine was acting independently of the government in Kyiv and was involved in the operation. Mystery has surrounded who might be responsible for the sabotage. Last September, of course, this resulted in the damage of 2 pipes transporting Russian gas into the European Union. Both pipelines were closed at the time of the attack, which came months after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. U.S. intelligence believes that pro-Ukrainian groups would have the motive to disrupt the pipelines because of how Russia was weaponizing them against Ukraine and Europe. Relations are being tested between China and Canada as a flurry of leaked intelligence reports reignites allegations that China interfered in Canada's recent federal elections. This kicks off a fierce debate over possible responses to Beijing's meddling. Opposition leaders have pushed the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, for a public inquiry into how China attempted to sway the result of 2 federal elections in its favor.
For the 2019 election, we created a high-level panel on election interference comprised of Canada's top public servants who are independent and professional and dedicated to this country, and they work closely with all of our national security experts, officials, and agencies to monitor day by day what was going on during the 2019 and 2021 elections.
Trudeau received campaign donations from a Beijing-backed donor, sparking questions from opponents. The administration says they will appoint a special team to identify and combat foreign interference. China responded to the allegations as total nonsense. The Aussies and the Americans team up as Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese will travel to Washington, D.C. to meet with U.S. President Joe Biden. Both leaders expected to announce Australia's plans to build nuclear-powered submarines. Albanese gave only few details about his trip to the U.S., saying there would be updates later. He said, "I'll look forward to the continuing engagement that I have with the U.S. administration." Albanese is expected to attend a signing ceremony in San Diego with Biden and the United Kingdom's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. The submarine agreement is taking place under an alliance between Australia, the UK, and the US that aims to share advanced military insight and other technology. The deal, which is believed to involve 8 nuclear-powered submarines, comes amid concern in Australia and the U.S., in fact, about China's increasingly assertive presence in the Pacific region. Coming up next, Georgians protest over a new law. Stay with us. We'll be right back after the break.
Life is not scripted, never foretold. No matter what happens and where it happens, open your eyes and read between the lines. And never stop asking questions or wanting to know more. Discover the unknown. Hear the human story. Be impartial. Be courageous. Find the untold story. And keep the pioneering spirit alive. Committed to truth. SATLUJ Network. Let the truth flow.
Welcome back. This is the SATLUJ Network from the Phoenix desk. People take a stand as protesters in Georgia threw gas bombs and stones at police after Parliament gave its initial backing to a draft law on foreign agents. Critics say this represents an authoritarian shift. Police in the capital city used water cannons and tear gas in an attempt to disperse thousands of demonstrators. The draft law could hurt the country's hopes of European Union membership. The law, backed by the ruling Georgian Dream Party, would require any organization receiving more than 20% of their funding from overseas to register as foreign agents. Otherwise, they'd face substantial fines. Georgian President Salam Zurabishvili wants to veto the law if it crosses her desk. She said she was on the side of the protesters. The United States puts its foot down as U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin made an unannounced trip to Iraq. He said the United States is committed to keeping its military presence in the country and continuing the fight against ISIS.
I should underscore that U.S. forces are ready to remain in Iraq at the invitation of the government of Iraq to support the Iraqi-led fight against Daesh. Daesh is not the only threat that this region faces. The United States condemns the repeated cross-border attacks from Iran. These attacks violate Iraqi sovereignty and put Iraqi lives in danger and hold the Iraqi people back. The United States will continue to stand with the people of Iraq. For the country of Iraq to realize its full potential, Erbil and Baghdad must work together for the good of all Iraqis.
The trip to Baghdad by the Pentagon chief came just before the 20th anniversary of the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. Currently, the U.S. has more than 2,000 service members in Iraq and 900 in Syria to help advise and assist local forces in combating ISIS. Austin said that the U.S. is focused on the mission of defeating ISIS and there is no other purpose. A 26-year-old man in Thailand has been sentenced to 3 years in prison for selling satirical calendars featuring pictures of cartoon ducks that officials say were an insult to the monarchy. The man, who is employed as an officer, was arrested in December of 2020 after police raided his home and confiscated desk calendars that included images of yellow ducks. The duck is one of the symbols of youth-led pro-democracy protests that started more than 2 years ago. Officials said the calendars, which were being sold through a Facebook group, defamed the king. After hearing his testimony, the court reduced the sentence to 2 years. He has appealed the verdict and posted a $2,000 bail. The defense argued that he had not produced the calendars and only helped to deliver them, adding that the duck was not an impersonation of the king, but simply a character he designed. A funding crisis has led to a big cut in food support for the Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. After a $125 million donation shortfall, the World Food Program lowered the monthly food vouchers for the refugees from $12 per person to $10.
Because of the new rationing, we can't get all the food items like we used to. It is now going to be difficult to manage with so little.
The WFP warned that further cuts were imminent without an immediate cash injection. Roughly 1 million Rohingya refugees live in camps in Cox's Bazar, having fled a military-led crackdown in Myanmar in 2017. Last week, New York-based Doctors Without Borders warned that aid cut would put hundreds of thousands of refugees at serious risk of malnutrition. Coming up next, European Union sanctions 9 people over sexual violence and violating women's rights. Stay with us. We'll be right back after the break.
Hello, my name is Jeffries.
Do you ever wonder what's behind the news? What is it that you are not being told? Going behind the news and finding the truth. Let the truth flow. SATLUJ Network. Let the truth flow.
Welcome back. This is the SATLUJ Network from the Phoenix desk. The European Union imposing sanctions on people and organizations for sexual violence and other violations of women's rights. The move is the first time the EU has issued sanctions against perpetrators of sexual violence. The list includes 9 people, including 2 Russian commanders involved in the war in Ukraine, 2 policemen in Moscow, 2 Taliban officials, and others in Myanmar and South Sudan. The Dutch foreign minister said by imposing these sanctions, we're sending a clear message to perpetrators that they won't get away with their crimes, adding these horrific, inhumane acts have consequences. This is also a message to the victims. The EU will support you wherever you are in The world's largest social networking company is eliminating more jobs on top of a 13% reduction last November. Meta Platforms Inc., that's the owner of Facebook and Instagram, is planning a fresh round of layoffs this week. According to media reports, Meta has seen its advertising revenue slow down, and some in leadership were asked to make lists of employees that can be let go. After the November cuts, CEO Mark Zuckerberg cited factors such as macroeconomic downturns and increased competition. If the layoffs happen this week, Meta will join DocuSign, eBay, and Google as companies that have made cuts in recent weeks. It's back to the drawing board for Japan's next generation H-3 rocket after another rocket launch failed. This happening just after liftoff when the second stage engine didn't engage, causing the rocket to self-destruct.
SRB3 点火、liftoff.
Solid boosters ignition and liftoff.
第3号搭載した H3 ロケット天気1号機は2023年3月7日午前10.
Last month, during another attempt, the rocket was unable to leave the launch pad. The H-3 was carrying a land observation satellite with an experimental infrared sensor made to detect North Korean ballistic missiles. The H-3 used a lower-cost engine and 3D printed parts. It was meant to ferry supplies to the International Space Station, along with lifting government and commercial satellites into orbit. As part of Japan's deepening cooperation with the U.S. in space, the H-3 is intended to eventually carry cargo to the Gateway Lunar Space Station that NASA plans to build, which will ultimately return people to the moon, including Japanese astronauts. A new discovery in Egypt is being described as having royal features and dimples, but the origin of the statue remains a mystery for now. A Sphinx-like statue and what's left of a shrine were found in a southern Egyptian city on the eastern banks of the River Nile. The shrine consisted of 2 platforms with a ladder and a mud brick basin for water storage inside. Both statue and shrine were carved out of limestone. Excavators describe the statue as smiling, with dimples and royal features, including a striped cloth headdress, something traditionally worn by pharaohs. A stone with hieroglyphic writings from the Roman era was found below the Sphinx, prompting experts to say it may in fact be Roman. More studies and testing will be needed to determine who exactly the discovery belonged to. And those were our top stories for today. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the SATLUJ Network, the news network that lets truth flow. For more information and full story coverage, go to SATLUJNetwork.com. And we'd love to hear your feedback at info@satlujtv.com. We'll see you next time.